It's easy to get lost. This is The Revenue Maze, and I'm Valerie Cobb. Join me as we navigate the halls, dead ends, and U-turns on your path towards upward growth trajectory. The Revenue Maze is sponsored by Revenue North Star, guidance and execution through fractional revenue leadership, uncovering hidden revenues, and empowering small business growth through process-driven sales customized to your company environment. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Revenue Maze. I'm Valerie Cobb, and I'm super excited today about this episode. This is an amazing human. She has consulted with 30, count it, 30 of the Fortune 500 companies. Now, that is amazing in and of itself. She's had over 30 years business experience. And on top of that, she approaches every challenge with passion. And you'll get that through this episode. That's amazing. But now here's the crux. She's very humble, but I want to say I'm sitting at the feet of a master. She's got honors, all these amazing things. She won't like me saying that, but this is true. I am sitting with the CEO of ZenChange Marketing. Welcome, Diane Moura.
Thank you so much, Valerie. It's great to be here.
I'm glad so much to have you on this show. We're going to hear about all these wonderful things that you're doing. I want to start the show all the time with what the guests are waiting for, which is, what is one thing that you can tell the guest that will help them get out of the revenue maze?
Well, it's a tough question to nail down to just one thing, of course. But if I had to choose one, I think I would say test before you invest. And what do I mean by that? So this could be before, if you're a startup and before you invest in a platform, maybe look at integrating some tools and white labeling and put it to market to a small test group and see what the responsiveness is. It could be, if you're a services business, test a new service on a small group of your clients and see what the responsiveness is, so you can continue to improve it in order to make sure that you're really meeting market demand. Because I find that a lot of the times as entrepreneurs, we get very excited about our ideas. I mean, we're by nature very creative. And sometimes we've got this whole thing going on in our heads and we haven't actually tested it with real people to see if they will actually spend money on it. And we all know in marketing the importance of, test and learn when it comes to advertising campaigns and all of that. But this is sort of another level of making sure that whatever product or service that you go to market with, that you've refined it as much as you can before you start putting a lot of money behind it, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I guess when I start to think about test it beforehand, you're right, with marketing, we do a lot of A/B testing and things like that to make sure that we capture that. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like my neighbor liked the idea, so-and-so liked my idea, all of those things. But give us an example a little bit of sample size or how you would test that first. Like what, because that's very open, right? It's like some people think 5 people said it's a good idea, therefore I've tested it, we're moving on, right? And
well, it is, and it's more of, I like to think of it more like a mindset than a specific algorithm. So taking like completely out of the context of business, let me, you were talking about in the intro about my Fortune 500 experience. And one of the things that happens a lot when you work in consulting for a big firm is you move around a lot. And so I got relocated a ton of times. And back in the day, I'm not exactly sure how things work today because it's been a while, but back in the day, they paid for everything when it came to your relocation, right down to any of the real estate transaction costs. So it was kind of financially in your best interest to, if you were moving from one city to another, to sell your house in one city, buy it in another, and then the company would basically pay for any out of pocket, which was great. But what would happen to me a lot anyway, because I was moving sight unseen to a number of different cities, is I would tour around with a realtor and rely on their expertise, find something, think, yeah, this is nice, and buy it. And then invariably, I would move in and a few months later think, yeah, but there was this other really cute neighborhood that I kind of would have wished that I had known about and maybe bought there instead. So that's kind of more what I'm thinking in terms of business, of, if you have an idea, look to do things like maybe bring on contractors to test out delivery before you actually hire a whole team, or, perhaps look to partner with other business professionals to deliver something and white label that together. So it's really the idea of how can I very cost effectively, I mean, it's lean thinking in a nutshell. It's, how can I very cost effectively bring my idea to market, test it, refine it, make sure that I'm heading down the right path and that people are genuinely as passionate about it as I am in my head. And then you can look at putting some money and some marketing behind it.
Yeah. I love the analogy because I think we've all felt that, I know you said it's been a while, and yeah, they used to relocate you, and then, yeah, you end up in the neighborhood and you were like, gosh, I wish I would have taken some time because this is a big investment. And I've done that myself. I mean, we talked earlier about me renting right now because I'm building a house, and that was the product of that. And hopefully this 3 to 4 year stint gets me in the place that I really want to finalize living in for the rest of my life, because I've moved 20 times. But
well, that's a great example, Valerie. You would not, had you been living at home and with your parents and then immediately said, I'm going to build a house, you wouldn't have a clue really as to what the best layout for you would be, so you really need to go out and test that. And in your case, you would have tested it by renting and living in other places and realizing, okay, I want a kitchen that does this, I want this type of a layout. It's the same in business. It's really about, making sure, we get probably as entrepreneurs, I don't know, like new ideas every day, every week. It kind of depends on the person. And, I mean, if you have a limitless source of capital, then, hey, put those all out there and see. But if you don't, then, part of that testing is, maybe brainstorming the idea with your team or with some people who are close to you. But then ultimately, if you're going to put it out to a small group of clients or customers, then, find a way to deliver something in a scaled down model so that you can get that feedback before you've put a ton of money into something.
Yeah. In the product development haunts, you'd forecast 5 years out to see where you're going as just the foundation to see if it was even worth doing, right? And then secondly, then you'd start your peer advisory summits and bring them in and customers in and make sure, actually you start with peer advisory summits and stuff to gain capture, that kind of stuff after you get a thread from that. And then you bring in peer advisories to make sure that you're kind of right. I mean, sorry, I didn't say peer, I meant just core groups to test it. Like in healthcare, we call it clinical trials, but in other companies, you call it just trials, customer trials or whatever. And before you actually launch off into your launch. And it is, first of all, I think sometimes when we get in the bootstrapping mindset, we're not losing money, but we're losing whatever took the place of your value of your time, right?
Yeah, and look, I think we've all learned, especially through COVID, the value, time is your most valuable asset. And so if you're spending too much time going down paths that are not going to be fruitful, then that becomes really costly. If nothing else, of the opportunity cost of what your time could have potentially generated. So if you think about, one of my favorite marketers, Seth Godin, I mean, one of his key principles is really the product is the marketing. If your product is that good, if your service is that good, then you shouldn't really need to put enormous amounts of marketing spend behind it. So really take a close look at how can you differentiate your service, how can you differentiate your product, so that if you put it up against your competitors, and remember, your competitors are not just a direct, I'm offering the same service or I'm offering the same product as you. Is like, what else fills that need? So a lot of times I'll talk to entrepreneurs and they'll say, oh, I've got this really cool idea and it has no competition. Well, it does, because something else is filling that need, perhaps in a different way. Maybe not well today, but it's filling it. If people have a need, they're figuring out a way to get it done. And maybe it's not as elegant as what you have in mind, but they're getting it done. So your competition could be, I'm going to do it myself. Your competition could be, I have to buy these 3 things because there isn't one thing that does what I need, but those are still forms of competition. So it's all of that upfront testing and planning and thinking and analysis, that the more of that you do, the less you're going to end up in a cash strapped position later on, because you underestimated what it would take to bring something to market.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it, because there's the Uber taxi Lyft model. What are other people doing besides Uber, Lyft, and taxi? They could be walking from A to B. It's not efficient, but that's what they can do, because all it is transportation, right? And when you've worked with big sales teams, when you're trying to train reps to realize that, it's like the light bulb goes off. Oh, that's a competitor too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you're not selling stuff, you're selling a solution to a problem. And if the problem that you think is there is not actually recognized in the minds of enough people, then you don't have a viable product or service. And if your product or service doesn't meet that need in a way where people truly see enough value to justify whatever you want to charge for it, then it's also not viable. So you can put all the marketing money in the world behind it, and maybe you'll get initial traction, but if you don't get referrals or repeat business, however your model is set up, then you're not going to have the longevity as a business that you need. So it's all of that upfront planning and strategy is really going to make the difference. And that's challenging for a lot of entrepreneurs, because you have an idea, you want to put it out tomorrow. And that is, one of the nice things about having a smaller enterprise, whether it's a small business or a startup, is that you don't have 25 layers of corporate bureaucracy where you have to run it up the flagpole and get a bunch of people to weigh in and approve. Sure. That, if you're the founder and you like it, in theory, if you've got the capital, you can just do it. But should you? That's really the thing is,
should you? Yes.
Time to market is a factor for sure, but should you really push out whatever you have in mind? So surround yourself with experts and people who can really test your thinking before you start to spend that money.
Well, and that's the beginnings of the marketing message too, right? Because if you really do have that, then you uncover all the differentiators while you're doing that, right? You're testing the market, you're finding what their voice is, you're doing all those things. And we know with the small businesses that a lot of times they have a great success from a couple of neighbors or people down the road or whatever. But I loved what you said when you said enough people as well, right? So the analysis of what is the market share out there that you are expecting to capture, because it's not good enough to have 10 people buy the product, unless of course the product is 1.5 million each and you have
sure. You got one
20% net margin.
That's not everyone's product or service though. So
we would just love it, right? Oh, here you go. And everybody's just going to buy that. And that also limits your possibilities as well. But I love it because, it's interesting on this show because there are just all these cool little nuggets that people say that just capture the essence of what you're trying to convey to the rest of the audience, which is amazing, right? Enough people, not that there is demand, but enough demand for what you're doing.
And the risk of, so a lot of times, again, when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'll hear something, I'll ask them, who is your target audience? And they'll say, it's Gen Z. Well, okay.
That's
That's pretty broad.
That's a big, that's a TAM.
And that's another risk is, the broader that you go, then, you're that much less attractive. If you're really looking to solve the needs of a target audience, you really need to get inside the heads of your target audience, which means you need to define them perhaps more narrowly than you might expect, because you need to understand, what are their emotional buying triggers? Like, what is going to make them, maybe you've got something that's really cool, but what's going to make somebody actually take out their credit card and buy it? And, so there's this, and sometimes we take out our credit card and we buy, crazy stuff that we really don't need, but it's because it fulfilled an emotional need for us. It's made us feel cool. It made us feel interesting. It made us feel smart. It made us feel funny, whatever that emotional need that it fulfilled. And those are perfectly valid. So it's not like you necessarily have to solve world hunger to launch a business. Yeah. But you do need to understand your target audience in sufficient detail to be able to identify how are you going to meet that need. And then that comes out in your story. So how you're describing your product and service, the words you use, the imagery you use, all of that is marketing. And the more you understand who you're selling to, then the more that message is going to resonate. Because, realistically, these days, if you launch a website, somebody's going to go to your website. You've got 3 seconds to capture their attention, to figure out whether they're going to scroll or they're going to be gone. And then if they do decide to hang out for a couple more seconds and scroll, then whatever it is that you're going to tell them has to be compelling enough that they look at that message and go, oh, you get me. And this is something that really will solve a problem that I have. So how can you make someone feel like you get me unless you really understand that target persona? And you could have multiple personas, but your message needs to be very clearly directed at them.
Yeah. I mean, so we talk about even just like cultural, I think Wendy Pease was on the podcast and we were talking about the cultural dialect or language within that to capture who you're talking to. So she does a lot of translation services, and she was talking about Google Translate versus, for marketing, Google Translate versus actually translation efforts. And we'd always, what flies in the UK doesn't fly even in Australia or here, right? We use different terms, everything. We calendar, they diary, we do, and people buy from people they like, right? And part of that, getting over the 20 to 50 points of familiarity, means that they won't even get past the first point of familiarity if you aren't speaking their language. And I'm not talking English, French, whatever. And I know you speak tons of languages, but the reality is what you're saying is exactly right. People want to feel at home when they hit your website. They want to feel at home when they talk to a sales rep. They want to feel like they are unique and human, not a number, right? And yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Yeah.
100%. And all that, again, that's part of your strategy, right? Yeah. So, if you, just because you think what you're developing is cool, you may not be your entire target audience. So, and that's something else to keep in mind, that when you're asking people what they think, they might not be your target audience either. So, in some cases, you have to take their feedback sometimes with a grain of salt, because maybe they don't get your target audience and you do, and that's perfectly fine. But the more that you understand them, the better. So going through that upfront strategy exercise is really, really, really critical.
I am curious, Diane, how long do you, just let's say it's like a product that they're going to go to launch, and maybe it's $1 million a year at first or whatever. And I know it's a broad category, but I think that also people underestimate the time it takes to build a strategy. What, in your estimation, is how long it's going to take to build that strategy. Because first you have to have the strategy, then you got to go to the people and do all the questioning and all of that. How long does that usually take in your experience?
Well, I mean, it's one of those really big consulting terms of it depends,
Yeah,
but
it
it really
does.
does. I mean, so part of the time really depends on how much knowledge and information is already in the heads of the people who are working on your team. So this is where, a lot of times if I'm working with a startup, we'll start in with a workshop with them, and we'll bring those leaders together. And we basically try to get out from them, what they think of the target audience and the strategy and the key elements of the message and positioning against competitors and all of those things that can then help you to build out that roadmap of what needs to happen next. So in some cases, depending on the scale of what you're doing, you may have enough knowledge in the room. In other cases, you don't. And it's in those cases you don't, where then the it depends part is, okay, how am I going to go and get that information? Am I doing research? Am I am I bringing in some potential clients or customers? Am I, maybe I'm building a platform and I'm actually going to partner with a couple of customers to build that platform and make some sort of a deal with them, so that in exchange for their time and helping me to refine what it is that I'm creating, that, maybe they get it for free for the first year or whatever the particular solution is. But so, in cases like that, you could actually start developing fairly quickly if you have that partner that you could develop with. One of the large corporate companies that I worked with many years ago did that every single time they had a release of their software. It was a business intelligence software. They would partner with a client, and that client would help fund that release because it was in their best interest. They knew that they were going to very quickly get the benefits, and they also could kind of shape it the way that made sense. The balance, of course, is you can't shape it so much in the direction of one client that it's not marketable for everybody, but that can be a viable strategy that would allow you to get to market more quickly. Or you could look at breaking it down into pieces. I'm a big fan of that. How can you phase out what it is that you're trying to launch so that maybe you can start actually generating revenue sooner from the first piece of whatever that solution is, and use that to help fund the subsequent phases. So maybe it doesn't, that old expression about, perfect is the enemy of the good. So, it doesn't always have to be 100% perfect. I mean, it can't be crap, or it's going to, tarnish your reputation. But, there are people who are excited to get in on a beta of something, if the benefits are there. So that's always an option. So there's, I hate to do that. It depends, but there's so many variables in terms of the time. It could be, weeks to months to years, depending on what the groundwork is that you have to put in place.
It was a broad question. Actually, it was probably a dumb question on my part, because it also depends on the industry. It also, because when I started,
how long is it going to take to bring a new drug to market? That's the regulatory layer. So that's a whole other question.
Yeah, that's a whole other question. I think the thing I was trying to point out a little bit is a lot of people underestimate the strategy portion and how much time it takes to do that, right? So in software and some of those things, that's going to be faster than heavy equipment. That's going to be faster than Volvo developing a car, right? We did a product launch in heavy equipment, and everybody was like, wow, that's so fast. And it was 2.5 years. Right. And so, but the strategy portion itself took, just the strategy of how we were going to even test the market took a year, right? Building it the right way. Of course, we had other product lines that we were working on as well. So I couldn't tell you which one, but software, sometimes you can turn them very quickly, but it's still not overnight, right? It's still going to take time. And those who don't map out the strategy, the things that you have step by step, this is what we're going to do. This is what says that this is accepted, whether you're using stage gate processes or whatever you're trying to do, right? If they don't map it out properly, then they waste time too on top of it. And that's, I was just trying to reinforce what you were saying with it and make sure that people understand that this is not a day usually.
No. I mean, it could be a day if you're launching a service, all the people are already in your company that would be able to deliver it, and all the minds are already in the room, and you just need to, basically bring everybody together, and, somebody's in advance of that done some research, and you kind of pull it all together and crank it out. So, I mean, there are some quick turn things you can do, but again, so many, it depends. But, your point about the cost of making mistakes is very well taken, because if you think of strategy as a series of paths, you can go as far as you want down any given path, but the further you go, the more expensive it is to back up and then go down another path. So, that time up front, as frustrating as it can feel, can save you a lot of time and money of heading down the wrong path. And, I think entrepreneurs in particular are, often when I talk to other leaders, they're like, why is it that I have to make all the mistakes first? And it does feel that way a lot of the times, that, sometimes you get these ideas, because entrepreneurs are often on the leading edge, sometimes the bleeding edge of some things.
The bleeding edge. So I love that.
I mean, it's untested ground. And so, you get this great idea and you start going, and, it just, the cost of going down that wrong path can be significant, but it's not like there's 100 other companies who've done exactly the same thing before that you can use that as guidance. So that's again where I think surrounding yourself with smart minds, so that you can at least kind of intellectually model those different strategies and get that feedback, I think is really helpful.
I love that. Now, it's great advice to the listeners. How did you get to all this? I mean, 30 of the Fortune 500s, now you're doing ZenChange Marketing. And I'm just trying to figure out, was this just kind of led you down this road? What you're very passionate about it. And we get that. And it is solving challenges. So let the listeners know how you kind of got here.
Well, I guess it was a little bit of a winding path. I mean, going into corporate America, doing consulting, getting to see the world, and just engage with leaders from all different cultures, I think was just incredibly, you can't get that kind of knowledge in school. I mean, I have the business undergrad at an MBA, but I couldn't possibly have taught me all that I actually learned in the field. And you ask about some of we're not talking about age.
Exactly. I'm like,
I started when I was 10, but you're not going to get that kind of information from a textbook, or even from talking to educators who've been there. I mean, some things you just have to do. I talk about making mistakes, because even working with Fortune 500 companies, I mean, they make a lot of mistakes. Yes. They head down the wrong path more often than you might expect. And going through some of those experiences and just feeling what that feels like is incredibly educational. And it was a wonderful experience. I really don't regret a moment of it. Ironically, when I first was in my undergrad, I was tapped by one of the professors in the business school to lead the small business consulting program. Oh. And this was a really interesting program where we would basically deliver consulting services for free for little entrepreneurs in the area. And it was some of the most fun that I think I've had. It was everything from somebody showing up with you'd love this, with a shoebox full of receipts, and they kind of need help with getting their books together and figuring out their finances, to somebody who they need help with a marketing plan. They need some financial input. I mean, just all sorts of things that we would do for them. And it was really a lot of fun. So that was, I kind of tucked that away and then went off and did my stint in corporate, which was rather lengthy. But at some point, you really start to, I was traveling all over the world. I was, at the point where I had a young daughter. I was away from her all week, and I thought, I did not purposely choose to be away from my daughter. I'm trying to, raise her and be with her and enjoy her. Unfortunately, I know this is going to sound very cliche, but I decided, what, I need to do something more local. And at the same time, I also wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing, that I had more impact, because sometimes when you're working in a large corporation, it's hard to turn big ships around. It takes time. And there was so many times where I would just see what needed to be done. And, you talk to clients and you knew what needed to be done, but there was just so many layers of process and control in order to make those changes that it gets a little frustrating after a while. And so I thought, I think what I would like to do, I've seen things work at scale. I want to now take that experience and I'm going to launch something where I can help other entrepreneurs to scale, use that expertise, but also do it in a way where I can be more connected directly to make those changes. And that is one of the beautiful things I think about, startups and small business, is that, if you're the owner, you can make the change. If you're, maybe you're a startup and you have investors that you need to consult with, but typically, if you've chosen the right investors, the right advisory board, they're going to have a mind for being nimble. And that's really the whole purpose. And so, you're going to be able to make those changes and, nibble away at the market share of those big companies that just couldn't get there in time. One of the companies that I worked for, back in the day, a technology company, we were actually trying to do business with one particular area of the federal government of Canada, which is where I'm originally from.
Oh, okay.
And just being with it, having such a large company that had so many layers of costs that had to go into all of our pricing, because everyone, you kind of peanut butter the corporate overhead, just made us not competitive for this particular segment. And so, I was part of an organization that actually spun off from that company, behaved as a funded startup, and was able to then go and get those contracts. So just the difference of having that nimble structure really makes a lot of difference in terms of what you're able to accomplish. And honestly, it's a lot more fun. So I'm enjoying myself more now, I think, than I did then.
Yeah, making the difference. It's kind of what some of us thrive for, especially in the environment that workers are in now. A lot of them are complaining because they feel like they're not making a difference. The whole cultural turnarounds, right? And, I have daughters that, they want to be passionate about what they're doing. And if they don't see enough, everybody, if you don't see, it doesn't mean that you want to be rewarded openly, but you want to feel like you're helping somehow, right? And making that difference versus walk through the door, do the same thing every single day. You see the uprise in the work from anywhere groups, you see the uprise in the fractional markets because of it. You just see a lot of people wanting to make a difference in something. I think that's what's kind of going on, even with the onslaught of social media. Yeah, we see all the political environments across the globe now that we didn't see before. But at the same token, we have also seen in globalization what people really want to do, how they work, why they want to work that way, right? And so with what you're doing, it totally makes sense. And now that you say Canada, I was like, I know you speak, let's see, Portuguese, was it, or did I get it wrong already?
No, that's right.
And
English, French,
French.
Portuguese, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So was that because you grew up in Canada and you were close to all the languages, or did
Yeah, I mean,
you?
I worked in French for a while in Canada,
Okay.
and so that was where that came from. And then, did a lot of traveling in Latin America, and my husband is Brazilian, so there's a
Oh,
connection there. So, but it's interesting though, getting back to what you're saying on,
yeah.
you're talking about the Great Resignation and the kind of the whole wave of people seeking meaning in their work. There's a very important message there, I think, for entrepreneurs in terms of how you describe your business and how you run your business. So, there's just some things like, obviously people want to either work from home or they want a hybrid model now. And that's something that, we need to accommodate, and even more creative models. So we switched at ZenChange to a 4-day compressed work week, because that's something that the team felt like they could be more productive if they had that extra day off. And, I think it's been a great move for us as well. And we're all virtual. We were virtual and on Zoom before Zoom was cool, I like to say, but, but I mean, we've seen some shifts. And so, if you're running a business, you really need to think about, how am I describing what I do, what our company offers, in a way that, that my target audience is going to resonate with, knowing that they're looking for meaning, they want to make a difference. People are really thinking about, where they are spending their money and whether that's the type of company that they want to support. So, in some cases, in a lot of cases, it's not always all about price. It's about impact, it's about meaning. And so, I like to think of our company as being like the wind beneath the wings of businesses that are trying to make a difference in the world. And, you could be an attorney making a difference in the world. You could be helping people in that regard, but doing something that is doing good, and having that choice. And I think that's one of the other beautiful things about having your own business, is that you get to choose who you work with. It may not feel that way at the beginning when you're first starting and you're, desperate for revenue, but, you will reach a point where you can choose the clients that you want to work with. And if they don't have similar values that you support, you can say no. And, that makes a difference also to your team, knowing, who they get to work with as clients. So there's, that whole aspect of meaning and, giving back and being genuine and having a message and telling your story. Those are critically important pieces to your marketing strategy these days. And I think we've seen that escalate even more since COVID, where a lot of people have really done this soul searching reflection of, what do I want to do for a living? Or, how do I want to live my life? And, that's why we're seeing, I think, so much of a shift happening in the workforce. And that's being reflected as well in the economics of just how people want to spend their disposable income as well. So also really good factors. And I'm going back to the product or the service is the most important part of your marketing. That is a very important element as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. We worked from anywhere in 2004 from the Cayman Islands, where it was a bit before all of this, but we did homeschooling through K-12 through the state of California at the time. And we did a lot of things that they were doing in COVID now back then, and I remember how challenging it was. And I was talking to John from Work From Anywhere, that whole group. I don't know if you're a member of that, but it might be a great group. But we were talking about how to his whole thing is about tax treatment in the multiple companies because you're working from anywhere, right? And so when you said that there was, it's not always about price, you're right. It's about the trade-off. Sometimes you actually earn more because you're not driving your car. You're not stressing out so dang bad. Yeah. And even health benefits. I was posting on Michelle Lederman's, she wrote The Connector's Advantage. I saw that you are associated with BNI and stuff like that. And just the health benefits for some of the things, if you can connect, but be in your own space and be, it just seems like a great way to go. And I applaud that you guys have been doing that since before Zoom is a thing. I love that a fellow sister uses that term, right? Because you've lived it, you've walked it, right? And I think that that's super important for this new regime that's coming through. I think the Great Resignation is being addressed, but not at the same time. I think that a lot of people are burying their heads and just going, well, why are we having these shortages? Why are we having, and really it is the cultural shift that we need to be working on, and not so much, well, obviously I'm opinionated, but
no, I mean, it's the relatability too. I mean, I think, not to overly generalize, but people who grew up in my generation at the time, you tended to work for decades for the same company. You worked your butt off. You didn't ask for more. You were looking for, you really wanted to show your company what you could do, what you could accomplish. And you just put your whole heart and soul into your career, and often sacrificed your personal life as a result. And that's just not how things are. But people my age are the people who are leading in corporate America right now. And so there's that relatability aspect of, and it's always easy and very cliche to say, oh, the young generation, but it's
it always happens.
I know it's always going to be different. I mean, at some point, somebody looked at us that way too. But, I think it actually is a really positive movement in terms of social change. I love seeing what today's, younger generations are doing and what they're thinking and what they're willing to speak out about and what they're willing to fight for. They're a way gutsier, I think, than we ever were. And I could not be more excited to see what they're able to accomplish as they rise into the leadership ranks. So, for any leaders out there who are feeling like, oh, the Great Resignation, it's going to go away, or that, why can't people just, suck it up and go get a regular job? Yeah. I mean, time to open your eyes. And I actually think there are some really good things coming as a result of the fire in the belly that these, today's younger people have. And, just kind of one other note on marketing when it comes to that is, think about that generation and how your products and services are going to evolve to meet the needs of that generation. Because even if they're not the direct consumers of whatever it is that you're selling today, you can better believe that they are very strong influencers, because sure, their families are listening to them. Other people who might be a little bit older are listening to them, and they are very quickly going to grow into being your customer. So what are you doing to meet them where they want to be?
Yeah. And that becomes part of the strategy that you were talking about to begin with. Who will that be in the next 5 years? Who will that be in 3? That kind of thing. So Diane, I love everything that you've been saying, and this has been so engaging. I know that you have got to have a passion outside of business. So what do you do for fun? Just kind of,
Well, I got a COVID puppy.
We now have puppies named COVID.
As many did. So she's she's a lot of fun. Love hanging out with my family and watching movies and, going to the beach. I live in Miami, so,
Yeah.
the sun and the pool and the beach are kind of a big part of our lifestyle. And so all that our wonderful city has to offer are also kind of exciting pastimes for us.
Sure, sure. Are you a scuba diver out there? Are you on your
Oh,
haunts
my
all over
scuba
the
diving
world?
days are, oh my goodness, I have not done scuba diving in years. Maybe I'll get back to it someday, but
Well, yeah, it's been about 6 years for myself, but I love that part of the world because of the scuba diving and then the hop and jump from Miami to any of those islands out there that give you all just the warm water. I'm out of Coeur d'Alene right now. And yeah, it's wonderful in the summertime and everything, but the lakes are massive. So it feels like oceans and we're surrounded by them and it's lovely, but they're like 50 degrees.
yeah, I remember. Hey, I grew up swimming in very cold Ontario lakes, so I totally get it.
Exactly. And it's the same with the Pacific Ocean. I go, oh my gosh, how did I do that when I was younger? But I pine for your ocean temperatures and your all that kind of fun stuff. And
Like
then
I always tell my Canadian friends and family who ask, like, oh, it's like, oh, well, you get to live in Miami. I'm like, life is about choices.
yeah, exactly. It's about choices. You come and go. You can make that decision. Especially we're talking
Absolutely
work from anywhere, right?
right. Why can't you work from a beach?
Exactly. There's got to be some product involved with that. I don't know what it is, but I just love it. Well, the group would love to know how to get a hold of you, ask you questions, those types of things. So, what is one place? Obviously, we'll post on the podcast some of your other places, but what is the best place for them to be able to reach you?
I would reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can message me there. It's Diane Moura, DianeMoura, or you can catch me on Instagram at Marketing Strategy Gal.
Okay, that's awesome. And remember, it's Deanne, but it's spelled the US Diane, right? So that
It
people can
is.
get the okay. Because I don't know, maybe that's a whole nother topic about the French language and so, all those things. I super
Someday,
fun.
version 2.
That version 2. Yeah. Anyway, that's awesome. So, anyways, thank you so much, Deanne, for being on the show. And thank you to all the guests who are listening at this time. Where if you like it on the podcast, like it on LinkedIn, show Deanne your love of the podcast. And yeah, it's just been exciting. Thank you again, Deanne.
Thank you, Valerie. It's been fun.
Thank you all for joining another great episode. For show notes, links, and resources, visit revenuemaze.com. And never forget, you are why.